Welcome to the Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Lakeville Select Board and Wage and Personnel Board. Is anyone recording the meeting other than LakeCAM? Seeing no one's recording, we can slide right into the call to order. Calling to order, Lakeville Select Board. Roll call vote.
I'm here.
Day here.
Candida here.
Plugging here.
Carboni, aye?
All right, we're on to FY26 budget questions and impacts. I'm going to let Andrew and Mike take this over for a little bit and we can have some discussions. I wanted to get this group together to make sure that we all understood all the inputs and outputs for the budget for the 2026 budget season, as there was lots of really great, robust communication and a few follow-ups that we had from the meetings of the last 2 weeks. So with that, I will push it right along.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I passed out an updated fiscal year 26 capital plan. The big change is the sidewalk plow is no longer in the fiscal 26 capital plan. And we pushed, the vehicle replacement for the police department from capital stabilization over to free cash. I think that was it. And then the new roof at the park office would be coming out of retained earnings, not free cash. So for this first item, just a very intro, we put together 3 scenarios for you guys tonight. We'll go through those on agenda item 4. Really just looking to get any sort of questions from the groups to see if there's any lingering questions before we dive into all this stuff.
All right, do we have handouts, or do I have to try to look at that?
Just look at that.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah, I
Did
can't
you- did
really
you
see
read
it.
that?
No.
Maybe, I can almost, oh, it's better, keep going. It's like an eye exam. Better, worse, better?
I think if I go any,
I see that.
Okay, yeah.
I'm good there.
That's good. Thank you. You see that?
Perfect.
I'll make it work.
So is there any questions from anyone? This is not on, this is agenda item 4, so,
Oh, well, so we should wait though.
wait, for any- yeah, for those kind of questions, if there's anything with parks or anything else. If not, we can go on to the next agenda item, for sure.
Any questions from anyone?
one, what would that leave parks retained earnings at?
Less than $12,000 because they're using 15 for this and approximately 15 for their operating budget. And they were only certified at 43,000, so about 12, 13,000.
All right, thank you.
And the capital expenditures committee meeting is this Thursday at 2 o'clock. So of course, the capital plan is subject still to change.
Have all members been sworn in?
I don't know if Brian has.
I've not been given any paperwork this morning yet, I think.
I think the rest of them are sworn in.
I believe it's in the folder.
I think I just
Missing
signed
some signatures.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, and then the rest of them.
Every year,
Yeah.
someone that doesn't go, they have to run right before the meeting, so I just wanted to.
But make capital expenditures
Yep.
meeting, she's been asking
Okay,
me to make sure
carry
she's
on.
notified of that. Excuse me, Andrew?
Yep.
Is the FinCom been notified about the capital expenditures meeting?
Barbara has, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Next agenda item, updates on funding sources. So the House budget came back in, I think this past Wednesday or Thursday. Just some of the results from that is the schools received roughly $211,000 in additional aid. We actually, on the town side, went down $22,000. The smart growth is still not in the budget. I wasn't personally expecting it at this point, if it was to come back anyways.
Was it 22,000 on chapter money, or was it just on
I believe it was unrestricted.
unrestricted?
General aid. And then some of the funding sources, like the meals tax and cannabis and short-term rentals, we didn't make any assumptions in the budget for those. Even if we would have passed those within fiscal 26, I wouldn't want to take a chance at estimating what those would be. So those, at this point, those aren't in there, but I think at least the meals tax is a good option for the fall, if the board would support that.
Usually on the taxes, and this is just my experience, anyone can tell me different, we usually put that to the finance committee first, and if the finance committee recommends a tax article, then it pushes to the select board. So that's just the way it had been in the past.
Yep, yeah, and we've done no background work on it yet, so, that might be a future item for the finance committee.
Okay, yeah, just let me know.
Yep,
Yep, same with the rentals, et cetera, et cetera.
yep.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Andrew, for the school, do you know the chapter 71? I heard there was an increase for chapter 71.
Chapter
Or
71,
transportation, did I get the right chapter?
chapter 70, for school,
Oh, which one's transportation?
90,
Oh, chapter 90.
yep.
Okay.
So 70 went up, I think, about 100,000 or so, but the big one was, transportation went up like 170.
Oh, okay, so combined total,
Combined.
it was about, that's your 211.
Yep.
Got it, thank you.
Yep.
Question if I may. Do you recommend leaving the number we provided them with the same or requesting some back now that they've gotten more?
I was gonna meet with the schools on that.
Okay.
I don't know quite how that mechanically works
Yep.
with their budget, but, it's obviously contingent on their, school negotiations as well.
Do we know if Freetown went up the same amount or for funding for them? Did we see if their funding was increased as well, or is it just the Lakeville portion?
Well, no, it's just, as the district itself,
Okay, so it's overall.
overall.
Got it.
Yep. Yep. Obviously, the funding sources aren't great from the state. Hopefully Smart Growth comes back, but still don't know yet. What I've kind of heard informally is that we're not going to really know until July or potentially even August
Yeah.
this year. It really depends on when the governor signs.
Yep.
Do we want to go over like any of the funding sources at this point, or just next agenda item?
We could probably move to the next agenda.
Yeah.
I had a funding source comment for the group. So back 3 years ago, and I know I'm beating a dead horse. Back 3 years ago, it was the decision of the Board of Selectmen to vote that they took a one-time lump sum payment for the cell tower. It's a great idea to have, that money, and that money is sitting in stabilization, earning interest. However, what they did, in effect, was remove a funding source from the operating budget. And that funding source for the operating budget, somewhere around 65-ish, for the budget. Because it was 40-something, and then with the increase that they were proposing, it was either 60-something plus or this lump sum. Yeah. So, but in effect, what we did is we cut off a funding source for a yearly budget. How much I'd love to have a lump of money earning some interest, I did want to propose to this board to consider having some type of mechanism where we take some of the interest from that funding source every year, an amount to be determined, hopefully around $65,000, and designate that to go directly into the operating budget to continue to keep that big nugget of money, but only use the interest in order to fund what we would have funded through the operating budget for every year. Currently, we're sitting at around a 4% interest rate, 3.4.
Hovering around there. Yeah.
So, depending on where the interest rate lays, it shouldn't affect that amount because the interest should be around 90,000 currently-ish.
Through March 31st, it was actually about 120,000.
Yeah, so we're still accruing interest. We still have that interest gaining more dollars in through, but we take a portion of that dividend and we appoint it to go into the budget yearly in order to replace that revenue source that we left. So in essence, if we are able to do this, if this is something the group ends up agreeing to, we will have a very rare situation where we can have our cake and eat it too. Whereas we get to keep that good dollar stabilization funding source and use just the interest to replace what was lost in the operating budget. So I ran that briefly by our town accountant to see if you can do it. And it's something he said we could do if we did have the appetite for it. It is a last-ditch effort to make sure that we're making good choices about our yearly revenue and not just the one-time sources. So, open the floor for comments.
So my understanding is when we made that vote at town meeting, all that money went into a single capital stabilization fund, so that fund's not kind of, it's commingled with other stabilization. So we'd be spending potentially our interest off of not just cell tower money.
But it would only be $60,000. It would be a set amount. It wouldn't be all of the dividends.
I hear you, but I'm saying that interest is everything, not just on cell tower money. So, and I'm personally a friend of compounding interest. I wouldn't want to touch that unless we have to. And I would also want to get clarification, since it's in a capital stabilization, can it only come out for capital use?
So, yeah, you would want to tie it to an appropriation in the budget. So my recommendation would be to tie it to debt payments, that we've incurred through capital purchases, which we're actually going to hit on tonight in one of the scenarios. Yep.
Any other questions?
Oh, so how much was this one-time payment for the tower?
2.1 million?
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, 2.1 million, which is a great number to put, and really did a great job putting stabilization, on the map for us and making sure we had money for necessary things. But it's 20 years at like 60-something thousand dollars was removed from the operating budget.
Okay. So, and you said it was earning $120,000 a year right now, so it's like a $3 million balance in there?
There's not quite a $3 million
2.8?
balance.
It's close to,
2.8.
yeah, it's close to 2.9.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that's for the whole thing, not just the cell portion, cell tower portion.
Yeah, I believe there was a transfer into capital stabilization at the annual last year, or the
That's
fall
like-
last year, from free cash.
So the cell tower makes up like 75% of that balance, like on principal, and then it'd be like 90,000 that we would have got from the tower's interest. So I get your point, I get Brian's point too, like, we'd be taking from, like, at least the principal from the tower, not the remaining balance in that case.
Yeah,
Sure, you'd just be killing any interest going forward.
but if you don't have an
Well, you're
operating
not-
budget.
You're not touching your principal balance though, so you'd still be earning.
Right, but you'd no longer be compounding.
Right.
I think my recommendation to that would be to come up with a funding mechanism with a financial policy. So if you do take in the spring, the fund, say, a portion of your debt payments from capital stabilization, you also have a funding mechanism once free cash is certified in the fall to kind of put money back in.
Yep,
So I think that's important. So we're not just drawing down on it.
I think that's a good point.
And if I may, Madam Chair, my feeling is that anything in capital stabilization is for one-time, purchases. So I guess I have that philosophy that, we don't know what's coming down, the pike. So that's kind of our security blanket should anything, really happen. I know it has to go in front of town meeting too, but, the fact that we are compounding the interest, I think that was the goal, was to try to build what we could without touching it. I mean, I didn't want to touch that money if we didn't have to.
Yeah, and like, as I had mentioned, taking a revenue source away from a revenue source strapped town is probably not a good financial maneuver as well.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? I know we are going to be concerned with our bond rating, and perhaps it's more a question for Mike, in terms of when we go for the fire station, any other debt service we have to do. How would taking these funds impact the bond ratings?
It wouldn't be in our favor per se,
Because we're short right now, right?
Yeah, they want to see,
Do you guys want to
Yeah.
open real quick, now that you have a quorum?
Sure, I'll call the Lakeville Finance Committee meeting to order on April 22nd at 6:02 PM. Roll call.
Barbara Minkowski?
Right here.
Aaron Beals, aye. Here.
Thank you.
All right, so
Sorry.
yes, so they like healthy balances and stabilization funds. They love financial policies. They love to see funding mechanisms for things like OPEB. And like I said, just putting money into stabilization in general to build it up. So I wouldn't say it's going to go in our favor. Probably have to speak to our financial advisor to see if it's going to be like a heavy strike against us, but I don't think it would help get us into that AAA.
So it's a cost benefit, right? You're paying more interest on one side and maybe having more on the other,
Yeah, yeah, you
income on the other side.
Yep.
What if you dedicated it to OPEB?
Well, I suppose we do, but OPEB has its own stabilization fund, which we typically annually put free cash
Yeah.
in. So
But if
I
you
think
did it-
that's like the norm amongst most municipalities, is just kind of take a chunk of your free cash, put it towards OPEB. That's a good box to check for bond rating, for sure.
Yeah, because if you have a dedicated fund source to OPEB, that bounces up the fund rating.
Yeah, in my previous town, we had one built into our operating budget, as well as a financial policy where we had to put X amount from free cash in every year. So we were putting like $1.2 million in OPEB, or at least $1 million in OPEB every year. So yeah, you can get creative with it, but typically it's free cash once a year to help fund OPEB. So, yeah.
Anyone else have any thoughts on it?
Sounds like something we need to discuss more now.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Just introducing it.
Okay.
Love everyone to
Maybe-
think about it.
And then see how our free cash is at the end of the year, and,
Yeah,
you know, we
because,
can continue that discussion.
yes, because again, using this for other things like it was intended originally as a revenue source is just kind of where I'd like to go back for. But if the board doesn't have a taste for it, that's okay too. Hey, interest is nice too. I got no problem with interest. I'm good. Anyone else for anything else?
No, a question on 2. I didn't realize we were skipping by that so quick. I'm sorry.
Can we go back to 2?
Question if I may, I forgot my book, so I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but I know I'd sent some questions on the increased park revenue. It was a Clear Pond season passes, they've got going up almost 60% this year. Seems really high. We'll know pretty quickly in early FY26 if that number was overshot or not. Can we keep an eye on that or kind of get reports from them? Because that worries me a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I do know that prior to my arrival towards the end of November, on the tax rate, Todd had increased estimated receipts for the park higher than they had ever been before, and we had to kind of provide a narrative to the state to push the tax rate through, similar to what I would have to do with the general fund if we did something like that. And the reason being was because of the new contract signed with Loon Pond. They kind of accepted that as, we'll hit that mark. Estimates for 25 were 290,000. Obviously, they're up to about 313 now, but definitely keep an eye on it for sure.
To Member Day's point on Clear Pond, it seems like they might have just found a number to address the deficit that we are not
Yeah.
paying this year and not really had any thought or due diligence on coming up with that number, and that concerns me because that feels knee-jerk.
Yeah, that's why we're keeping a little bit in the retained earnings, as Brian asked, about $10,000, $12,000 there. Probably hesitant at first to move the 15 for the roof, just in case they need some mid-year adjustment in the fall.
Yeah.
But based off what was certified by the state before my arrival, and given that the new contract hadn't been signed till I think October of this year.
But that's the Loon Pond contract.
That's the
not
Loon
Clear-
Pond
This is
contract.
Clear
Yeah,
Pond that
so
we're, yeah.
I think they're just kind of watching bottom line revenues.
Yeah.
So,
I have a question for Member Carboni. Whenever they raise the prices, don't they usually have the select board pass that? No? When they had the Clear Pond Park passes last year and they opened it up, it came
don't
before
think
the
we-
select board?
I don't think we, comes in front of us for a vote. I think they set the rate.
They set the rates, we just said if, who was it available to?
Right. That's why it came back in front of us.
Thank you.
Because of the money that I think that we allocated to them.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's definitely tight. I think, as I said, right when I first started, we kind of had to sell it to the state that we had this new fixed price contract in place and we could increase revenues that we were counting on getting from Loon Pond. So, but it is, like many of our receipts, our local receipts, the estimate's right up against the actual, so it's close.
The other question I had was there was a line for lodge utilities reimbursements that
Yeah.
only goes up about 4,200, but we increased the electricity line from 24 to 36,000, and the narrative we were given was because Cranberry Catering will be paying the electricity bill directly to us. So we're trying to figure out where the other $8,000 of that is.
Yeah, I can,
My understanding was that that was for the electricity for all of the parks, right?
I watched the meeting today. I could have interpreted this wrong, but it was that 24 to 30K was going to be parks and Loon Pond Lodge all in one line item. But if it went up 12, and if I'm only seeing 4,200 in the revenues, specifically saying lodge utilities reimbursement, it just seems like a big gap. It must be somewhere, but it didn't make sense looking at the lines.
Yeah, I can double check that.
yeah, look into that.
Anyone else? Okay. Free to move on.
Yeah, so this is the, I guess, the nitty-gritty of budgeting. So we created 3 scenarios to hopefully, I guess, fix the problems that we have identified over the budget hearings and the original budget presentation.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. To Andrew, is this discussion on requested enhancements, or are we still in the?
Requested
Okay, we
enhancement.
moved on, okay.
Yep.
Need our counter.
So Mike's gonna kind of run through each of the 3 scenarios. Some are the same, some of it's different. Feel free to ask any questions. This probably doesn't view very well online, but this is like really like the nitty-gritty of budgeting in a municipality. So what I will request of both boards is to take a vote on each individual enhancement, whether it's a yes or a no. So, without further ado.
Sure, thanks. So in all 3 scenarios, I took estimated new growth down by $25,000 on the revenue portion because what we're seeing is not the type of permits we thought we would see. So just to kind of take a conservative approach, I brought that down 25,000. EMS receipts are projected to be closer to 1.2 million, as we discussed in the last couple of weeks. So I increased those 70,000. And some of the, in all 3 scenarios, I kind of level funded some of the revenue estimates from the prior year. It was kind of plus minus by $1,000 or $4,000, and I just kind of brought those to level fund. Really, in the first scenario, the big influx of revenue is using $376,000 from debt service stabilization to cover the FY26 debt payment for Assawamsett Windows and Doors project. It's not ideal. As Lorraine mentions, it's a one-time revenue source. However, it gets us everything that you see that makes up this $296,000 on the screen here. It gets us the 4 firefighters built into the budget. It covers the fringe benefits of $54,840. We obviously could take down unemployment because we're not projecting cuts in this scenario. And then the remainder are, most of them are housekeeping items, different education stipends, getting the assessor's salary from the expense line, as we spoke about last week, up into a salary line, and putting the town planner back in because there was talk of that being taken out and put back in. So would essentially be increasing the budget $296,000. However, this scenario still includes using free cash as well to fund the budget. So we would be using $165,504 from free cash and $376,000 from capital stabilization. But this is basically putting all new enhancements, with the exception of the police and the select board, and you know, taking the firefighters that are currently paid out of ARPA and putting them in the budget. So would really be tapping into kind of all one-time revenue sources, stabilization and free cash in this scenario.
Ideally, I think in the fall, we'd come back and put any free cash back into the capital stabilization, so it's really a revolving door of revenue.
Borrowing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would literally probably say if free cash comes in where it was last year, 1.4, 1.6, we should put at least 300 back in. So this is a short-term fix, if you will. The next scenario is similar to what you've already seen in the initial budget presentation. It's really just those handful of housekeeping items. We had 2 education stipends, come up at $900. We fixed the enhancement for the clerk salary. As we discussed at the first kickoff meeting, we took the food for the dog officers, and they will rely on their donation accounts for that. And then we cleaned up the assessing salaries. And this still cuts, I shouldn't say cuts, because they were never part of the budget, but it does not fund the 4 firefighters. It does not include any of the fixed costs. It doesn't include the 2 police officers that were requested by the police department. So this is pretty bare bones. This is basically what you've already seen, but with a handful of housekeeping items. But in this scenario, we're completely weaned off of free cash. So we're still using the 376 from capital stabilization, but we're free cash free. We're structurally balanced at this point, if you will.
Mike, quick question.
Sure.
When you're going through these, are we basically saying in this sheet here, right? So rows 6 through 11 would be the additions. The stuff below is what's below the cut line?
Yeah, right here,
Okay.
scenario 1 addition. So this, and again, this 26,000 is just more housekeeping things that we had noted during the first 2 budget meetings. So this is really bare bones, weaning us off free cash and using the 376 to cover the debt payment for Assawamsett.
I should also note, we can mix and match. You don't gotta pick a scenario. You can pick something from the list that's getting cut and add it to the, what's getting added. So,
À la carte.
yeah, exactly. So these aren't like, this isn't glued down yet, obviously, but they serve as kind of like templates.
Then the final scenario, so everyone can see, is, again, common theme, using capital stabilization. We added in new enhancement with the Council on Aging. We added in all of the housekeeping items that we spoke about. We increased the town clerk's salary, education stipends. And in this scenario, we still did not fund the 4 firefighters or the 2 police officers or the dispatcher. That was part of a new enhancement this year. We did put the town planner position back in at $89,604. And in this scenario, like the previous, we have weaned ourselves off of free cash. So we're not using free cash to balance the budget here. But as mentioned, we are still using $376,000 from capital stabilization to fund that debt payment. And really these, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, trying to come up with ideas on how to get us through, whether we use free cash, use stabilization. It's somewhat of a shell game at times, but, you know, and we know how important it is to try to make all the department heads' requests come to fruition. So it's pretty much where we're at with the 3 scenarios.
I think with all 3 scenarios, we have enough free cash in reserve for what I would probably call next year an override doesn't pass, or we don't choose to do an override, we have some sort of cushion to meet any sort of challenge, let's say.
And I can send this to everyone, so they have an electronic copy of it. But it does have a free cash breakdown, so every scenario has where we were certified at our free cash, what we've been used, what this scenario would use, and then leaves us an ending balance. So,
Can you
you
zoom
know,
in a little bit, please?
sure.
Oh, much better.
So this scenario here was the first one I displayed. It had everything in it. It had bringing the opera guys into the operating budget, using 376 from capital stabilization to fund the debt payment. And as I mentioned, we're still using 165,000 between the reserve fund and operations to balance the budget. So this is kind of everything but the PD enhancements. And then every scenario has one of these. Sorry. So, you know, this scenario was similar to what you've already seen. This is kind of just doing the housekeeping items, weaning us off of free cash. So we used 16,000 in the fall, expected to use 125 this year for OPEB and 558 for the capital plan. And the other scenario is the exact same. So as Andrew mentioned, it leaves us 722,000 from the fiscal 24 free cash certification. So it leaves us a cushion going into next year. But really, it's, as Andrew said, it's kind of mix and match what we choose to do. But
Member Plonka?
Yeah, I see where you're drawing down from the free cash. You did say I lost it when you guys are tapping into stabilization.
So all three of these scenarios are using capital stabilization to make our FY26 debt payment for the
Oh.
Assawamsett project.
And that would normally come from,
Operations.
from the budget.
It's
Got
not
it.
excluded debt, so it's not raised on
Got
the
it.
tax rate.
Right, so instead of coming out of the operational budget, it's gonna come from stabilization fund, okay. And that amount was,
376,000.
okay. All right, so that frees up 376, technically, right? It frees that amount.
Yeah, and I increased receipts by 53,000, I think,
For
in total,
ambulance?
so.
Yeah, you tweaked the free, yeah, the
Yeah.
receipts, I got that, okay.
Which is why, in that scenario, we can put 296,000 and kind of take our estimated revenue down, because it's a balancing act, right?
Understand.
We can recoup the full 425,000, or we can add in 296,000 and try to keep our revenues, you know, fairly conservative and have a good free cash number next year, so it's,
So it really comes down to the priorities and how much free cash we want to remain for next year.
It's
Exactly.
every choice is a Pyrrhic victory. So, you know, we can either fund things at appropriate levels and support, you know, services in town. And we're not being, we're not throwing caution to the wind on any of these. There's no splurges that are going on, even at our highest rated scenario 1, there's no splurges going on. Or we could find various ways in order to live within our dwindling means. But that means cuts to existing service. And by existing service, I'm only really talking about the firefighters for the existing service. Because technically they were funded from one-time monies. So that wasn't, we had COVID money and then, what was it, CARES money? And then ARPA money funding positions. The COVID money funded 2 firefighters for 2 years? Is that the CARES money?
No, the ARPA money was supposed to fund 4 for like a year and a half.
ARPA, yeah,
And
but
then-
it was CARES money first. We got
Oh, the
2.
initial
Yeah,
two.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, we got
yes.
initial 2 for
Yep.
CARES money, and I think that was 2 years, 2020, all of 2020 and 2021-ish. And then the CARES, which you're right, it was supposed to fund us for a year and a half.
Yep.
And because of some irregularities in the way it was processed, it only funded us for a little bit more than the year. So we took a hit on that funding source.
and I'm glad you brought that up, because you see what we're doing here, right? Where we funded 4 firefighters with a one-time revenue source. Now we're trying to put them in the operating budget. Now we're finding a one-time revenue source to fund something
Oh, yeah,
else.
exactly.
So it's
There's
like-
no irony lost here. Like,
So,
there's no
yeah.
good choices to me, for any of the boards. But there are choices to make, so.
I think one of the positives is we're trying to put enough free cash away or not use it. Because we're seeing some towns use close to $1 million, and then they're like verbally saying that we need an override next year. And if they're using that much free cash and they don't get it,
Well,
it's like
they're cutting.
absolute
They're
devastation.
cutting whole departments if they don't do that.
By multitude, yeah, it's just, I don't want to bank on an override.
Yeah.
So, that's why you see some free cash in reserve.
Could we go back to the free cash tracker you had there on another tab? And any of them is fine, just make sure I understand them.
Yep.
So this example here, you've got available balance 557. Are you saying that in the fall, when we know how things are going, you'd say, take 300, 400 of this and put it back?
in.
And then leave us with 100?
Well,
200,
ideally,
or-
so it's kind of a cumulative free cash certification. So if
Okay.
we spent the full 1.422 that was certified by Todd, would be kind of starting at 0, right? So
Yep.
we're starting at 557 in this scenario. I like to think that by the time November rolls around, I'll have free cash certified. So you'll have a
This-
new allotment.
Okay.
So you'll be plucking from your new bucket at that point. But yeah, let's just say, worst case scenario, free cash is not certified at the November fall town meeting. Yes, I would say let's tap into this, but
So
highly unlikely.
either or.
Yeah.
Put
I-
it back from that.
Yeah, we'll have free cash certified by Halloween, hopefully, so we'll have a new allotment.
There's at least 425 coming back from the
Writing that
schools.
down in my book
So-
by
Yeah,
Halloween.
I don't want to bank on it, but I would say it's going to be about the similar amount, maybe a little higher.
I agree, I think we're gonna be around 1.4, 1.5, so,
And if we really had to, we could pull back on the capital plan next year, which,
you know,
Except for 175,000, which we can never
well,
make a move on.
no.
8 years.
Madam Chair, if I can?
Yep.
I know this comes up periodically before town meeting. So if we allocate money for a particular project at town meeting, and then there's excess, fund after the project, it seems like every now and again, there's one that pops up and says that we still had money left there. Have we exhausted all of those?
Yeah, so Todd did a wonderful job making sure that those were all up to date, any available balances. It's small, but when you cobble together enough, you can cover something. Todd did a great job at doing that. Same approach I took in my previous town. Franklin DPW super came to me with some old articles that we can cobble together and offset. But it's pick your poison. I can either offset a future capital item, or I can just close them to free cash now. The net result is the same. So my practice was not to offset the cost of a new item, it was just to close them to free cash immediately. But, I mean, I can do either or, but, yep, we can do that.
Yeah, I was just curious,
Yeah.
what was still lingering out there. And again, one-time money, thinking in that brain, to allocate it towards something like that, especially if we're moving free cash into something that's not.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. There's just, Todd was on top of it, so there's not a lot out there
Yeah.
hanging out. And there's not a lot of articles that are stagnant either. Like anything that's older, people are still drawing down on and they're utilizing. So, yeah, there's not a whole lot. Yeah,
Figured I'd ask the question.
no, it's a great question.
Another source that we've tapped into when we've been in bad straits is the assessor's overlay. I don't think it's funded this year because of issues. I think it got drawn down significantly.
Yeah, so the required amount from the tax recap last year to put in was 198,000. I put a placeholder of 100,000 just so it didn't get lost, if you will. But yeah, we should ideally be putting a couple 100,000 in there.
Yeah,
As
we
you
used
can
to
see,
put
we needed
130.
198.
Yeah, we used to put 130
We
in
needed
every year.
198 last year. I'm putting a placeholder of 100,000. We're right where we need to be right now.
Okay, good.
So if we were to take anything out of overlay, I would say for a small project like 25,000, which I believe is what they did last year. I think they covered something at annual town meeting with 25,000 of overlay, but I wouldn't recommend taking
Nope.
hundreds out. It's right where it needs to be, so. Yeah. That was kind of the first spot I looked after last week's meeting, so.
Comments?
So, I guess my question is, we know that we've made mistakes in the past by funding things from bonus money, right? It's like paying for your household's operating expenses with money you get for a bonus once a year. That's irresponsible because that bonus may not come the next year. So we're kind of doing that again by taking money out of free cash and capital reserve to cover our expenses without seeing a printout of how those line items match up. What alternatives do we have to look at to say, well, because to me, it's very different to say, well, we're going to use free cash to buy something for the police department, for example. That's we make the decision, we don't make the decision, but it's not saying we're going to hire these two police officers for, from that same free cash. So is there a way for us to figure out, can we fund the operating budget without touching free cash? No, we can't. The only choice is to raise taxes.
Well, you can only raise taxes 2.5% unless there's an override. So, and then obviously the other option would be cuts on the appropriation side. But yeah, I mean, you're kind of, like I said before, it's kind of a shell game. Like you're using free cash to build up your capital stabilization, and then you're using capital stabilization to fund your budget. But you can say, we're not using free cash, but it's a direct transfer.
It is, yeah.
We're
We're just calling it something
You're calling it
different.
something else. So, no, you're right. And that was one of the first things Andrew asked was, is there any debt we could cover, for this year? And as you can see right here in the middle of the page, we only have $443,000 or $443,062 of non-excluded debt. So the 805 we raise on the tax rate, so that's a net zero. We raise it and we pay it. The 443, 376 of that is the Assawamsett band payment, and the rest comes in via community septic. It's levied on the real estate bills, so it's essentially a net zero as well. And it's only $58,000, I think. So there's really no, like big expenses like in the debt area that you can just pay off and be debt-free or anything like that, which I wouldn't even advise, because when the time comes when you have to borrow, then we're right back to where we are now. It's sticker shock to build it into the operating budget, so. Yeah, we're really not structurally balanced, operational balanced regardless, but we're leaving our free cash alone.
Okay, so that statement right there is kind of what I want to zero in. We are not structurally balanced,
No.
right?
And we knew that last
We
year
knew
going
that,
into this year.
And we know it's going to get worse.
Yep.
We know, the school and all of the different things that are coming around the corner. When is the right time to bite that bullet?
2 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're going to vote on passing it again, and are we going to say we made another mistake? That's why I'm asking.
Obviously, with the board's input, I was gonna probably immediately after town meeting, start pushing
Yeah.
for an override.
So we're not the only town. If you're,
Of course
if
not.
you're looking, if you're looking to see everyone, your expenses have gone up more than 2.5% in, every year for the last, 8, 9 years. It's been so incredibly significant. So too have the expenses of the towns. And we just haven't kept up with any of it. And we haven't kept up with any of, wages, for some of our personnel. Like, we've been running very lean for a very long time. And there's only so long that lasts you, and especially in a environment like we have today, with a high inflation environment. So last year, Bob Nunes pulled the last bit of magic out of the Lakeville magic hat. And he said to us exactly, he goes, this might be your last year, and he thought we would have to do an override this year. So when we started seeing the funding sources below and everything come in, it really cemented it that, that he did have his little magic 8-ball in well, and he could see the writing on the wall. So us, Duxbury, Bridgewater, Rainham, they're actually in all worse places than us. I think, was it Hanson that 31?
Easton, it's all.
31 teachers
Yeah.
laid off, and, half a department laid off, and all of that.
When is the regional school system going to start impacting our budget? Is it?
They impacted already.
No, with the capital plan.
So with the capital plan,
With the-
they haven't asked for any capital this.
But the numbers coming around.
Oh.
Numbers, right?
So their budget back in 2019 was the same size as our budget. So we were around 29, 30 million, they were around the same. So they're at what, 44,
49.
49 million. So their budget has continued to go on this type of trajectory where we're cost containing, et cetera, et cetera. Theirs has really gone up on a higher trajectory. So they're taking more of our budget every year. We were at 53%, then 54, 55, 50, now we're at 57% of our budget goes to the schools now. So they're taking a disproportionate amount. But we don't have any control over that, obviously, besides the, suggestion.
I apologize. I wasn't clear. I know we
Sorry.
had some, no. it's
On a
my fault.
tangent.
I
On a
wasn't, clear. No, I
tangent.
wasn't clear. There are some improvements that need to be made at the high school and the compound, right?
They
So-
haven't come to us this
They
year
haven't
yet.
come to us, but those numbers are jaw-dropping. You guys have heard those numbers. So they're going to come to us at some point. Do you have any idea? Is that going to be in 3 years? Is that going to be because,
I know they're maintaining boilers right now. They have a lease on the boilers. Whereas they were supposed to come like 3 years ago to the towns and try to have a capital project. I don't know where that went or why that went awry. But I did see that there are some grants out there for school boilers right now, and some stuff we can try to work with, but no idea when they're coming. But they're coming. They're always coming.
is there, I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding. Was there a feasibility study done for Freetown Lakeville schools?
Yeah, they
Involving
created,
replacing the high school?
they created a facility master plan that
Okay.
had between 3 and 5 options. The biggest one is obviously 288 million.
Exactly. So the lowest was like 90 million, and the
Yep.
highest was like 280, 290.
Yep.
Okay. So if they are going to be coming to us with those kinds of numbers, are we talking in 3 years? What are your thoughts on
I've
the
asked them and
sense
they
of things?
didn't, they said we're still evaluating.
Okay.
So they haven't given a hard answer. all they say is it's going to be a public conversation in front of the school committee.
Okay,
But-
so we have that, and then we have the Old Colony. Does anybody have any idea what the Old Colony numbers were
Well, that's a tricky situation.
being
So
thrown
the-
around?
The ceiling that the building committee voted was 280 million. The actual number, they're hoping to be far less than that. The 280 was built in due to, what we should say is still a less than predictable construction market, especially with things happening right now. That vote would be November 18th tentatively.
Yep.
And that would then be, if it passed, shovels in the ground, I think they said would be sometime during calendar 27. Sound right?
Yep.
And then
Okay.
that would be early borrowing, but they wouldn't have to take on the full assessment until we're trying to we actually asked for that timeline recently. We said, can we get a timeline to say, if this passes, when do residents start to see this assessment get hit on them? Because we need to know, because we just passed a fire station, right? So we need to know
That's
when
right.
they're hit with that, when they get hit for a colony.
Point of clarification, MSBA usually funds 50% of that number?
They're at
46, I believe.
46% of what's called allowable construction costs. So there are certain things that are not allowed to be funded by MSBA. So you're looking at is you take the number, let's say 46% as a rough number, and then divide that across the towns. Then there's an awkward formula on how that works, but you could say Lakeville's roughly 22 to 25% of that number. So
We don't really have a timeline on that. We can't say that we're going to be looking at potentially asking voters for additional funds in 3 years. We're not exactly
well,
sure.
that's coming in November,
That's coming in November.
right?
And then the next one would be 2 years after that.
Nope, that's the only vote.
That's the only one
Yep.
scheduled for November.
But that's all excluded debt. That's on,
Correct.
that doesn't go into like an operating budget, that's all excluded debt.
It will,
So-
it will affect us eventually.
Oh,
'cause
everything.
It's about 250 more students.
Yeah.
So take 25% of that, that's going to be on the assessment.
Only if we get a full complement of Lakeville
That's-
students going in there.
Right.
Whereas in
Right.
this year, we didn't
And they
even make
might
our
shift
quota.
from one
Yeah.
district to another school too, so.
Yep, yep, yep,
Money will follow around.
yep.
Yeah,
But there will be more operating costs.
yeah.
Good questions.
I think that the scope of that is something that, I haven't seen since I've lived here. It's hard to wrap your mind around it and what exactly that would mean for taxpayers. But I do think if we're going to go into asking for an override, whether that's this year or next year, that's the key part of the conversation. Because you don't want to hit them up again 12 or 18 months later and say, hey, we need to come back to the bucket.
Well, you have to.
I know we
in
have
the
to,
way
but
that-
there's,
yeah, in the way
there's
that
ways of
it's
managing it, so
structured.
it's not like this. It's more like,
That's why we're kind of stuffing away free cash as much as we can. Just in, there's no guarantee an override passes. I think the stats like 15% of them pass. So a vast majority of them fail. And so towns have to decide how they're going to pay for stuff.
Well, ultimately, it'll be up to the people of Lakeville on,
Right?
everyone's experienced increases in their cost of living. It's a very hard time to ask for anything. But at the end of the day, it's their vote.
I think the communication's gonna be key, right? I mean, they're gonna have to make a decision, higher taxes or less services.
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's a choice everyone's gonna have to make, but we just need to make it clear that that is the choice.
Yeah. The last time we had a fiscal cliff like this was 2008, 2009. So it was the 2009 school budget, and they laid off, how many people, do you remember? Was it like 30?
I think that it ended up being through retirement. I think that was it was a couple of different scenarios, but I can't remember the date.
Yeah. And then earlier than that, we had no police station for a year in the 90s.
94 to be exact.
Yeah.
I know that date because I moved here.
Town meeting vote, didn't vote the budget as requested. Police department was cut. State police ran the town of Lakeville for most of 1994.
Question on an enhancement, we can come back. Fire. Between Mike and Andrew, what is your confidence that that 128 is correct for 4? Because when we did the ARPA money, it was 240. Are there been enough positive decreases in other budget line items in fire to give us confidence that number is going to work?
So
Like
this,
callbacks and overtime specifically?
Yeah.
yeah, this number is exactly taken from Chief O'Brien's submission that everyone was CC'd on. So I, have to defer to his expertise in firefighting with the overtime and what he needs. But that is the increase he provided with the 4 firefighters, the 128.
Now it's over the 3, so it's not 128 for 4. That's without fringe benefits as well.
This is without fringe benefits?
Yeah. So that number is probably closer to like 200.
The fringe is right below it. It's the 54,840. And right now, we transfer every quarter. We transfer, the fringe benefits are automatically charged to the general fund. So every 3 months, I do a journal entry and I move them over to ARPA. So we're drawing down on ARPA, not just with the salaries, but with the fringe. And that's kind of, divide that by 3 divide that by 4 is kind of how I arrived there. It's about 13,000 every quarter. So, yeah, but that number could change. If 2 people who aren't on our health insurance leave and we hire 2 people who need family plans, that number could be drastically different. So that's what we know now, so.
Because they're all in singles now, right? That's what we were told by
3 singles, 1 family.
3 singles, 1 family, so you could go up anywhere up to 60,000 more per month.
That's correct.
Wait,
Yeah.
month or year, I'm sorry.
Well, this would be 3 months at like 13,000, if you will, per,
Okay.
so, yeah, 13 to 14.
Family plan's about 22-ish. So times 4 is obviously 88.
88, yeah.
Yeah.
So that gets you closer to the 240, so then maybe with is there an overtime reduction? I forget. I don't have my book, I'm sorry.
There was a reduction. I can't say for.
I couldn't hear you. I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I asked what the overtime reduction number was, because I didn't forgot my book at home. And I think you said the fire sheet electronically is.
He pushed it down to 100 under that scenario for overtime. So under the 3 person one, it was 170.
Okay.
I think he pushed it down to 100 if it had 4.
And then did he move the sick time coverage line as well?
Yes. Yeah, I just don't know offhand.
And then how about the contract holiday vacation coverage?
All
That'll be
those,
all 3 of them.
all those lines came down a little bit.
So here's where it was. Oh, do you have that?
I think this is an old one.
Okay.
And we
Those
pay
3 all
100
together.
They don't
Okay.
pay
170, 32,
We pay 100 of it. They don't pay.
150.
Okay, so that gets closer.
It does. I just worry because of exactly what you said.
You know,
240, how does that turn into anything less than 240?
That's a big
and,
one.
and,
That's a big
with
bill.
all due respect, this particular budget's one that struggles year after year.
Yes.
So I just want to know that you guys are comfortable with it. I mean, is 2 an option? I think we've asked in the past and never gotten a straightforward answer.
I was
Like,
gonna
there's-
ask, is there a compromise?
Like, are there certain shifts where 4 would be great,
Yeah.
3 will get by?
And I should have asked the chief when he was here, but is 2 better than 4? I mean, better than 0, but not as good as 4.
Right, I agree.
I know there is one shift that it's usually less calls, for overnights and stuff, but I want to say it was 3 to staff, correct? And not 2, and I can't remember the reason. I remember him like giving some really detailed answer about it being the number 3, but I think everything's on the table. I wouldn't say it's 4 or nothing. Like, that would be a false dichotomy.
And
He
the-
also, sorry, he also did like the back of the napkin analysis too, where like if we hire at the 4, the overtime costs go way down and then the revenue goes way up. I mean, it's hard to put any confidence in those specific numbers, but like you could see them generally moving that way.
we've been at 4 for a year, and I don't think revenue's really gone crazy up. Right, I mean, has there been any inclination of that?
Yeah, it's close to 200,000, so he's on average taking in about $103,000 a month, which will be 1,236,000 is my estimate through June. And I believe last year the actual was only 1,026,000, so it's up about $200,000. So,
I think maybe this is a dumb question, but like, why would adding somebody bring revenue up? Is it because they don't have to allow
Other towns.
another town to take that person to the hospital, or is that where it comes from?
That's
think he
what-
said-
'cause that's-
Calls are calls, right?
Yeah.
I think he
They
said,
get
yeah, the
calls.
overtime goes down because they're not calling people back, and then they're able to send more people out on calls to get the ambulance revenue from that. I think that's how it was explained.
We just didn't want to
Yeah.
we just didn't want to raise the revenue too high on those, so we wanted to play it safe. I don't know if you want to speak to the DOR aspect of it.
yeah, so basically, you have to provide justification as to why our FY26 estimates would be higher than our FY25 actuals. I used the example of the park earlier. You had to basically sell it to the state, if you will, provide a narrative, provide justification that we had a new contract. In this particular case, you'd have to maybe, if we decide to raise rates, or just show an analysis that we are on pace to collect $1.2 million. But in years past, it's been 1,026,000 and lower. So that's why first pass, we were a little hesitant to go high because we weren't including those firefighters in the original appropriation. So I originally had it at 1,050,000. I feel confident going up about 70, as I mentioned. And then that leaves us a little wiggle room if things don't stay on the same track they're going on for the rest of fiscal 25. But yeah, the state can step in and not certify your tax rate if you've, to balance your budget, drastically inflated estimated revenue just to balance your budget. The state can say, what's your justification for doing so? And they can kind of roadblock your tax rate certification for that, so.
Mike, would you say if we even considered 3 as the number or 2 as the number, would like 80,000 per be the right number? Like to, impact-wise to free cash, how much less free cash?
I'm not, just because I'm not well-versed, because I'm so new and I'm obviously not a firefighter, I don't even know if I'd want to take a stab at answering that. I think I'd rather defer something like that to Chief O'Brien, just so I don't misspeak. But, in a perfect world, right, we increased it 128,991. You'd think divide that by 4, but that may not be the case depending on where they land on a salary chart.
On the
So,
fixed costs and then the going up on the overtime and the coverages.
delta
Yeah.
with the overtime, yeah.
Because that number there is only about 45,000 per, so you have to figure out the savings also to make
savings
up the
also.
real number,
Yep.
Yeah.
which we've been operating with 4 already, so we should kind of know where our number is. That's why I just still,
Kind of.
yeah.
Madam Chair, what is the plan now? So we're seeing this, different scenarios. Are we bringing this back to the select board on the 28th for a vote?
We could, my goal for tonight is to get an understanding of what, like, town clerk salary, like, is that like something you guys are interested in, or like, is that just a total no? Like, I want to get like an idea of what those would be, and then maybe bring it back next week for a final.
So we want to vote on specific lines or enhancements to talk, or do we want to?
Good.
Because again, this is the TA budget that Andrew had brought forward. So any changes to the TA budget would be incumbent on all of us to have
I'll be vocal right now. I'm not going to support any budget that does not include that last enhancement.
the assistant to the TA.
Yes.
It took me a minute, Brian. I'm like, wait. I agree. And the reason I agree is because everything else falls apart if there's not enough staff in that office.
Yeah, and I did not put together a scenario where that stays in the budget. So, as Andrew mentioned earlier, we can kind of pick and choose. I put the planner back in. I don't know, there was talk of consulting there. So obviously you can get creative with the line items. And obviously if we're gonna take a vote at a future meeting, I'd be happy to send this exact document to everyone. So,
That would be helpful,
Do,
and I
sorry.
could see it.
Quick question. Do we have a recommendation from HR on the COA's enhancement request? On whether that puts us to any complications with other employees and steps and whatnot?
She recommended going through the formal union process
Okay.
first. I
So
mean,
that'd be
I-
outside of this process?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem funding it in the fall, it just has to go through, 'cause I'd hate to get it funded and then the union denies it.
Right.
And it's like, what are we doing with it, you know,
Okay.
so, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so it can't, I must have been confused. I thought it had already gone through the union process before it came to the board.
No.
So I would take that off the list.
I agree.
I would take it off as well.
Not that I want to, but
No, but
Which one are we taking off?
14,
COA.
it hasn't cleared the union yet.
No, I think it could be ready for the fall.
$77?
I think I do it, someone
We're
told me
all good
along the
now.
way, a budget's not truly final until the fall.
Right.
So, you can always come back and supplement it.
Oh, absolutely.
I've been advocating for a consultant rather than a full-time town planner for years for the town of Lakeville. And I definitely think, I hope that we decide to go that path, at least for a couple of years, to figure out what it is we really need. And I definitely think it would bring that number way down. I don't know if we
I
can cut it in
don't
half.
disagree. I think,
You know?
not, even though we do have a job description, like out there where we might be in a position, and I don't know. I haven't checked in with Andrew this week, but
Yeah.
I agree. I think we could have some savings, but I am concerned with the numbers that were presented to us from the planning board on the hourly wages for those type of services. I'm not in the market to pay $200 an hour for, services that if we hire someone, even if we hired someone on a part-time basis, that would be significantly less,
My only, and was totally getting off topic here, but I do think that we don't know what we don't know. And we're such a weird spot here in town that if we could get somebody that has a wider range of learning for us to pick up on, that $200 will end up being well spent. And then we can say, this is what we know we need. Because right now, we don't really know what we need.
Well, we could have 2 tiers of service as well. We could
That's
have,
true, too.
we could have some coverage, and we could have some
Yeah.
senior consulting
Yep.
coverage as well.
Madam Chair, if I may, I believe the planning board chair said that they were going to look at what projects specifically, they needed to have addressed or that had already started, that needed to, be taken over the finish line, so they could probably allocate some hours
Expertise hours to that.
to that.
I think they're gonna see I think there's gonna be things going on that they don't, are not yet on the radar,
Oh, yeah,
for sure, scary.
because you never know what projects
never
are
know.
coming in.
Madam Chair, could we ask the town administrator to expand on the contracted services? Because I think this goes back to an idea you had that sounded really good. If this goes back to the grant stuff.
So this one, oh, that one, I was looking up top.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I met with a grant writer,
The one that just got the firefighter funds from Middleborough,
Correct.
correct?
actually, on a recommendation from Noel Willow, actually, I met with Stephanie Hall, the grant writer from Middleborough. And she was interested. She got $6.7 million from Middleborough last year, with only like a match on Middleborough's side of $400,000. So that's huge. They got a safer grant, park grant, community one-stop, all the stuff we're looking to get, she helped get, and now she is offered, I figured this would probably be a conversation for Monday night, upcoming, $100 an hour, probably $10,000 per year. We only pay her if we actually get a grant. So,
That's a great
I know,
contract.
seriously.
If that's what you got, that's a
Seriously.
great contract.
so I met with her last week. She talked the lingo pretty well, like,
No, I've
impressive.
been following all the stuff that's going on in Middleborough for the last 2 years. And even before that, they had another good grant writer, Bob Bob Sylvia used to do a bunch of their grants and
Oh,
get
yeah.
lots of grants as well.
Yep. So I figured she's a good investment, 10,000 potentially for millions of dollars. Figured that'd be a win, definitely, easily. So it's an enhancement, obviously, at this point, but
Money well spent, yeah.
I think so too.
I think it's a needed.
Madam Chair, I look at this, if we're playing the, where do you throw the darts at? I mean, if we say, let's time out on the planner for now, which I agree with the others that said so, look at contracted services. You can put together the assistant to TA, contracted services for grant writing, the town clerk increase, which I think we've all said has been overdue for a long time, the EDU stipends, there's a lot that you can combine in that one line.
So would everyone have a taste to move the planner dollar amount down into a contracted services line for planning services? Because I don't want to decimate the line. I want someone there. I
Yeah.
want someone supporting the planning board. I'm fully behind it.
I actually have a couple meetings this week about different things with it, so.
Okay, yeah, I don't, there is a difference between full-time plus benefits and then contracted services. I would like to see contracted services funded to your point.
At least for a time.
Yep, and to be able to make sure we are taking care of the planning board. They get left out an awful
Oh,
lot.
it's the most important thing. I can't, I've advocated for 6, 7 years now, so, yeah,
They get,
really important.
they get the short stick a little bit.
She actually doesn't do, I guess, grant management, which isn't a huge deal. I figured she would probably assist someone to do that, and then potentially long-term, that person she trains would be the grant writer. So potentially the assistant to the TA could be trained by Stephanie, and then that person's applying in the future.
Don't rule out interns. We like a good intern.
Yeah, that too, that too. I don't know if it's easier just to go down the line and just see which one you guys like or not.
Do you mind zooming, making that a little bit bigger?
I
I
think
don't
I
know, we
have
need
a
to see the first 2 columns.
more consolidated list here too.
Yeah, there we go.
So the first 2 are required.
They're contractual.
Contractual, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So those 2 are definites. Town clerk salary, it sounds like it's gotten positive feedback from the select board. Is that a definite?
Yes, from me.
Yes, for me.
Yes, as well.
Yes.
We actually took down the dog food line.
Yep.
We figured we would just take it out of donations. The next one is contractual. That's the principal assessor's salary starting July 1st. The contracted services tied to that would be the commercial industrial appraisals. Any objections to those 2? First one's tough to object to, the second one, potential.
And this is what we talked about last week when I had mentioned we'll just kind of shift the expense up. That's essentially what we're doing here. So the net is about 23,000.
Madam Chair, is that what we're saying about the contracted assessor services, that we're thinking it's about 10,000 for that additional?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood the
Yep.
amount there, okay.
The enhancement one for the COA, we've kind of talked about not doing that, maybe not until the fall.
I'd like to push that off till fall.
I'm assuming they can get through the union process by then.
I would
Right.
think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think so.
Good.
The town planner we just spoke about, I can bring that back next week when we vote on it. What
Find some
I,
dollar wise on what we should probably put in the pot.
I did
Exactly.
find the old quotes that planning got and sent those to Andrew, just so we had something to work with.
The 200.
There was one that was
an hour.
crazy and 1 or 2 that were much
Yeah,
smaller.
yeah, so,
yeah, I can bring that next week and,
yeah, but like I said, we probably want tiered coverage where
Yeah, right.
the projects, the hardcore projects that require the expertise versus, you know, some extra help and some extra guidance.
Yep. The next one's obviously the big one. I guess, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to see if you could try to get some information from the chief, 3 versus 4. And to Member Dave's point, we've gone through a year with 4 firefighters. We should know. Granted, I understand this, but we should have a good idea what 4 costs, right?
So, I will speak just from remembering on what the chief had said and why we don't have as clear of accounting on that. He had such high turnover on there that it created its own type of animal that didn't allow him to take a really good look at it. But that's me just re-quoting what he had said at the meeting, and that's
Yeah.
why the numbers are less favorable, in his opinion.
But did any of us come away thinking that that problem is gone?
No,
That's my question. Do we do exit interviews in the town when people leave?
We offer them.
they're not
So it's
mandatory.
optional?
Yeah, they're not
People
mandatory.
do it
It's optional.
I don't think you can mandatory.
It's optional, and I don't think many people take us up on it.
I would guess not, but to your point, the turnover rates are alarming, the way that they were presented. They were much more severe than I thought they were. And unlike the police, where it was clear, like, why people were leaving, it was really clear. He's like, went to the state police, went to the state police, went to a city. You can see that progression where it's a salary, but that's just the bane of small towns everywhere. They grow people, and then the people grow and move into cities and more dangerous jobs and get paid for the more dangerous jobs. And then they come back when they're tired of that. But there is a very concerning trend
And we don't.
over the turnover. Yeah.
Because the rule of thumb in business, and you guys can all correct me if I'm misquoting, but it's somewhere around 30 to 40% of your annual salary is lost when you have a turnover. So, right, it's right in that range, right? It could even be higher.
Agreed.
So the retention becomes a focus if you've got a budgetary crisis. So that, to me, is I think something that should be looked at.
Question that maybe members Carboni or Chair Candido know, didn't the select board vote a few years ago that firefighters hired had to sign that contract saying if they left in a certain period of time, they had to pay it back?
Yes.
But the chief at his presentation said he's not even having them sign that anymore.
You are correct. I did hear that. I did not follow up on that, but I did hear that now that you're
I
saying.
think he said people refused to sign
Yeah,
it, they
just
just
walked away.
walk away.
Yeah.
Right, and that's, but I thought I heard him say that, and then he said, so I don't even bother now. I could have misheard.
No, I think I think you are right. So again, that's another
so that's-
concern.
Anybody that is then hired and not signing that, you know, we're not recouping all that training money for them to get certifications and
Hours and
off they go.
dollars, hours and dollars.
So your OT goes up, your training budget gets
Mm-hmm.
basically wasted.
Yep.
I mean, I think we need to take another look at it. I realize he's a strong chief,
Yep.
but if the select board voted on that for policy, I'd be interested when, and
Andrew, would you mind going through that?
I don't know if you
Because
have any dates when that might have been done or not, but if it was during his tenure or previous
It was-
chief's tenure.
It was within his
was-
tenure, because prior to his tenure, chiefs were allowed to do everything themselves. In 2019, I moved to have a director of HR, and all of the functions of like the hiring and the paperwork, et cetera, and background checks
Somewhere around
ended
there.
up going there. So it'd be somewhere around early, mid-2019.
And the vote, I believe, was not this past budget, the one before, because it was a retention opportunity for him to try to retain, you know, candidates. So it was an initiative to try to reduce that turnover.
I'd love to see any more documentation on previous year's turnover too, because that was only the last 9 months.
You know, because now, I mean, there was the issue or the concern of the condition of the, you know, the facility, which we're already in progress of, you know, rectifying that. So if it's for other reasons, you know, it would, and I'm sure the salary, you know, could be a part of it too, but.
Sure, but people don't usually leave within the first year for a salary. They sign up, they have a salary, they know the salary. That's usually a
Yeah, to your
multi-year.
point, on the exit interviews, I mean,
Yeah.
I think anytime that you start to see a pattern, or if there's a higher number of turnover, there's, probably something that, can be looked at. I mean, I know we're here to try to help solve the issue, not create any additional
No, but it becomes a budget,
concerns.
it becomes a budget conversation, and it becomes a budget line conversation on, how we're funding this and what's being done. So I'm gonna allow this conversation to end and wrap up. And, Andrew, I'd love you to check in with HR as well, and put something together for us, and then we can maybe have a discussion.
Okay.
And we'll probably have it, executive session discussion.
Any more feedback on the 4 or just,
I'd like to see the breakdown for the 3 as well, just,
Breakdown.
just so we get all the facts in front of us as much as they can be.
I'd like a 2 as well.
Yeah.
Can things go okay with 2, and then when we're in the fall, we can adjust? Well, because it's like, as we, whether it's 2, 3, or 4, something else is gonna be below the cut line, and can we live with what's below the cut line or not?
So my concern, and Andrew, maybe our new grant writer can tell us this, if we're funding it, does that lessen our ability to get grants for it if we're currently funding? So if we're currently funding at four more firefighters, and then we're like, we need more firefighters, but we're funding it, does that negate kind of our proposition and make us come from a point of a less strength point? Not that I want to leverage, safety over, grants, but I just didn't know if it makes it more likely or less likely that we'll be grant funded, because ideally, how long is that safer ground? Is it 5 years?
3 years.
3 years. 3 years would be a nice kick the can down the road time frame for funding firefighters.
My understanding is that our last attempt at the SAFER grant included the fact that we were not meeting national standards by having 4 people per shift, and the SAFER grant would have brought us up to that, as well as there was 4 people due to be laid off because there was one-time funding used. So I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my understanding was we thought we had a good chance because we were, A, they're going to get laid off, we could keep them,
Yeah,
and it would get us to the 4 per shift. We still lost it.
which seems odd. Okay,
yeah, I can do that research and get back to everyone.
much appreciated.
The fixed cost is tied to that, because that's the insurance and pension on those 4. The next one is 2 police officers.
I didn't really hear too much about that. It was very quietly asked
I
for.
don't even actually remember that.
I would like to hear a little bit more about it and get a little bit more about, is this a safety concern? What's not getting done right now, or what will be done with these additional roles?
And should there be a fixed cost line for them as well, or is that
I believe
pulled
that
in?
is not pulled into those.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, but it just kind of flowed right by, as far as additional.
It
So,
certainly wasn't pounding the table.
no,
No.
no,
Is it something that's been like asked for like year over year and it's?
I don't remember it
it's just
last
on there,
year.
like-
I think he's made it the last few years.
I don't think it made it to
Oh, really?
That's
finance
what I
committee
I mean,
last year.
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
No, I don't believe that was ever brought up by Bob or anything like
Yeah.
that during the
Well,
discussion.
we haven't been fully staffed in the police for quite a while, and we're like finally there. So maybe he hasn't really pounded the table as much because he didn't even have a full staffing complement at the time, but I would love to learn more.
I thought that's what he said when he was here, that we were staffed.
Fully staffed.
That's what
Yeah.
my understanding was as
Yeah, I
well.
don't
Yeah.
recall and ask for anything more.
No.
I think with Chief Perkins, he has a global view on the budget. He's not just looking at his own budget.
No, and I appreciate that, but we
Yeah.
do want to hear, we don't want to just be like myopic and only go for, you know, what's being told. We want to make sure we're setting a standard, because whenever we have more firefighters, it requires more police officers to answer those same calls. So, you know, that could be the reason. Like, his reasoning could very well be predicated on, if we have more people going out on fire calls, we need more police to support going out on those same calls. So I'm not sure what the context was.
Then also the other part of that was the dispatcher, and then increased OT training. I think he had spoken to us at the joint Freetown Lakeville meeting about that need.
Yep.
Would you want any additional information for those two as well, or?
If there is a way to tier perhaps that increase of the OT training over the next 3 years, as opposed to one-time hit, if there was a way to build on that? Because I know that everybody in the room at that point was, you know, aware of the, you know, what the importance of what it was that they were looking to do.
Yep.
So if there was a way that we could tier that, it might be helpful.
Okay.
I thought he said he needed the dispatcher. Did I miss? I seem to recollect a conversation about that.
Yeah, it was a part-time dispatcher.
Yeah,
And that was the
that's a
54,
very
right?
important goal.
54?
Yeah.
Yeah,
For one part-time.
one part-time. I'm inclined to support.
That might actually include the fixed costs associated with those.
Okay.
Now that I'm doing the math in my head on the officers and the dispatcher.
Yeah, because it's like, so a part-time dispatcher costs more than a full-time firefighter.
Yeah,
That was-
exactly. Yeah, so that would, I think it might include some sort of training or fixed costs associated with it. I can find out.
Thank you.
And then obviously, the contracted services is for the grant writer.
I think that's a slam dunk,
Okay.
you know? 10,000 for a possible million. I'm just impressed at the not paying unless we get the grant. That's
Madam Chair, what's that for? Contracted service?
grant writer.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry, right.
She said that's like standard practice in the
I love
industry.
it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true for
I don't
all
know.
of them.
I love it.
And then the last one is the assistant to the town administrator.
Yeah, we want to keep you around, Andrew. We don't want you burning out in a bright flame.
Now, there's an impending retirement in a different department coming
Yes.
up. So, I don't know if that can be kind of like a dual role between my department and that department, but we can explore it.
No.
Don't spread yourself so thin.
I'm
I
a
know,
no.
I know what it's like.
That role may be re-envisioned in the future as well, but,
Yeah, I'm disinclined to say yes.
I'm curious what Mr. Tallyman's doing over there in the corner, if he's adding up. What's that?
He's mathing away over there. Do we want to look at anything else on the other ones? Is there something?
so this is the master list, I
Yep.
think, of all the
Okay,
enhancements.
that is everything. Good. Does anyone want to revisit anything that we can talk about now, or is everything, you know, we're going to get some more data on firefighters, on police, on fixed costs, and what was the other thing?
Town planner.
Town planner, yeah, and additional information on turnover.
I have a comment on one thing on there that's only sort of related. The dog officer item, I noticed they got another big donation of supplies from somebody, which was great. The kid got it instead of like birthday money. How do we get the word out that like, it's not that we don't want your dog food anymore, but if you're gonna bring it,
Got it,
it
go
should
through.
be this.
Yeah, outreach.
Just so I don't wanna feel like we're wasting anything. I'm sure he'll still use it.
I think
but-
that's a fantastic use of Facebook right there.
Definitely.
Don't be afraid to post on Lakeville Helping Lakeville. I just don't know anyone that doesn't like the dog posts.
He's the mayor of town.
It is, he's the shadow government.
Was there any apprehension to using that capital stabilization account? To kind of pull all this off?
Like, there's not a lot of There's not a lot of fat, like, to come from.
Madam Chair, the only thing that I've had anybody ask about is a $75,000 irrigation well. If we're having issues with retaining personnel and we have a budget issue, why are we spending $75,000 to water grass?
So it costs like $12,000 a year to do it, so on
But do you
the,
have to water it?
I guess not.
I understand that
Yeah.
the service comes into your property, just like it does. If you have electrical service, you pay a minimal fee to have that there, whether you draw electricity or not. And so the question has been that if we have $75,000.
I think it's a valid question.
$75,000 is in effect a body. And so what is more important, green grass or somebody in town?
Do we want to have a clover initiative where we plant clover on town? Like, because honestly, like, it's the water consumption of the, just like you said, the grass
Yep.
that is the problem.
Yep.
We'll
There's
spray
beautiful
paint.
dryscapes out there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just one of those things, it seems to, and a couple comments came from people in the building community, and, you know, I had discussions with them about what it costs to actually do something in
Yes,
a community as opposed to doing it
4X.
at your home.
unless someone wants to dig it for us,
But-
pro bono.
I mean, it's crabgrass now, it's gonna stay crabgrass if we don't water it.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying, but I do notice the item says irrigation well and site work. What is the and site work part of that? Is that,
I think I don't know the technicalities of it, but I think the whole kind of site is not
Just redo.
well done
okay,
from the initial construction, but I don't
Gotcha.
know that for certain.
And I recall Franklin mentioning that he would have to have people in there and strip it down and replace soil and you know, seed and so forth in order to get it green and productive, but.
So we knew that back in 2020, and we went back to the builders and the landscapers and the irrigation people. They were supposed to remedy all of those things while it was under warranty. I don't know what ended up happening in 21.
I don't know, but we ended up getting an ARPA allocation for it. I think there was miscommunication on that, and we only got 60 total between the library and police station, and it's really like 120 between the two. So, 60 is being used right now for the library as well, through federal funds, and then this is like the remainder tied to it
So that's ARPA funds.
for the library. This is, capital stabilization. I can go talk to Chief Perkins again. I think he said this, potentially one we could cut if we had to, and
I think
maybe
it's a good point.
rescope it.
And I think Member Hunt brings up a great point. I mean, even if we just push it to fall till we have some more information, I mean,
Not to mention, you can't plant anywhere past June anyways, you're just gonna grow crabgrass again.
There are project delays on that too, on this and the library, so in the fall wouldn't be the worst idea.
I feel like there may have been a missed opportunity with some of the ARPA stuff, you know?
Oh, I see it. I see it all over the place, but, you know,
They gave us 5 minutes. Don't feel bad. You did an amazing
Oh,
job.
my goodness. Head explosion.
It was shovel ready by Tuesday at 12 o'clock. right? Bids are due, yeah.
Barbara.
Since you opened up the capital planning budget, I was curious about the town website. We have $30,000 allocated for that. Is that something that we can wait on?
I would go no on that. I would think the accessibility and the functionality is gonna involve more people in town if we can be a little bit better, and there's some functionality I'm hoping that we find about minute taking that could actually save dollars.
there was also, I'm probably gonna get this number wrong, but Civic Plus right now is offering something ridiculous, like 70 or 80% off to do the transition, which is, that 30,000 would cover. I think if, you know, if we defer it, we could potentially end up paying more to do it later.
Just like we did with the, like we didn't with the
Like
library.
everything
Remember?
we did.
We did everything, okay.
You came in late, but I took off the sidewalk plow.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for being late.
No problem.
the ladder truck, we have no choice, we have to get that, right? I'm sorry.
That's correct.
8 more years.
175, that's brutal.
Actually, comment on that, for town accountant, was that Mass General Law, anything helpful that was in that old article?
Yeah, it was very helpful, actually, yeah.
Okay.
And it checked the box, it was allowed, which I wouldn't second guess under Todd.
Just
anyways,
because you
but-
can do it,
Yeah.
doesn't mean you should do it.
But yeah, I mean, it is a good point, right? At least it does kind of scream operational, but definitely was helpful, and it's legit, so.
All right. Anything else on requested enhancements? I'm trying to read it. Oh, we could talk this to death, but I think we're good with that. Do we have any new business before the board? Anything? Any new business? Any old business? Brian, I can see the
I'm
smoke.
just trying to think. No, I think I'm good.
All right.
Thanks for checking though.
Yeah, I saw the face.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we have a resident who may want to speak.
How can I help you? Come on up to the mic.
I'm Noel, I'm just seated on Parks, but I'm not speaking as your Parks member. I'm speaking as a resident.
Thank you for the clarification.
And I just, someone who knows a lot more about finance, and they've lived in Lakeville for a long time, years and years, asked me the question about the budget problems. They said, why don't we have retail CBD in Lakeville? Because you could get 3% off of that. And I'm not talking about a smoke shop. I'm talking about a very high-end. When my husband was diagnosed with cancer, his oncologist said to him, we went to Panacea in Middleborough. My goodness, do they make some bucks in that place? And I would love to see.
You're 100% right. It's 3%. It's good money. We had 3 different HCAs at one point that all wanted to do retail, and none of them ended up doing it.
Can that be revisited?
We did send out a invitation to, was it invitation to bid?
RFI, request
Yeah,
information.
RFI for other people, and we did get one person coming back, and we are actually in talks with them.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever been into that shop, but I would recommend all of you just take a field trip. I don't know.
That would be a
I think-
newspaper story.
Oh, I think you do have to give them your driver's license because they need to know who's going in there. But, I mean, there are people with PTSD who are prescribed it. Oncologists prescribe it for people getting chemotherapy. And there's a whole number of diseases that are being treated. And all of that money is going to Middleborough.
Yeah, we had 2 or possibly 3 requests in front of us. One was for a delivery, one was for, what do you call the other one? It's not a delivery, it's a courier,
Thank you.
and the other one is retail. The delivery and the retail it would be revenue, and the courier would be no revenue for us.
Couriers, it involves more traffic. We already have traffic problems here, but
But I don't think, a couple
the way
people
that
buying
I-
something every day, I don't think that would add to it, but I do appreciate the suggestion.
It's a
and
lot of
the
money.
board knows, and we actively, or not this board, the previous board have actively sought out, once we saw nothing else was coming to fruition.
I
with
would
the
love to see it
existing-
happen for Lakeville. I'd love to see all that money stay in Lakeville.
I will say this,
Agreed.
just to add to this before the conclusion, I think that when all of that was happening in town, the projections of what we thought we were going to get were very different than what we actually ended up getting.
Well, they were
And I
all
think that was state
predicated
related.
on having retail as well.
Or whatever taxes we were going to get in, the state changed the rules and all the formulas. It's just
Yes.
like affordable housing. It's like, you think you're doing it, you think you're putting in a 40R and you're going to get money and you're not. It's
Yeah,
like,
the state.
so I don't know how it's
The
working
state
out.
is like Lucy, and we're like Charlie
Yes.
Brown.
I worked in that industry on a national level for a while, and there is a lot of money in it.
It's a huge
There are a
growth
lot of-
industry.
There are
Growth
a lot of
industry.
issues as well.
So
that
I
come in, and you have to be
remembering
very careful.
Lorraine saying increasing revenue streams.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Just a suggestion anyway.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it, thank you.
Thanks, Noel.
All right, make a motion. To adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, select board at 7:22.
I am. I make a
Second.
motion to adjourn.
Got a motion and a second, roll call.
Aye.
Yeah.
Candido, aye.
Well, guy.
Carboni, aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Sorry, again, guys.